I'm alright, 'cause I'm okay. Doesn't matter if my beard is gray. Just listen, I have something to say. I'm alright, 'cause I'm okay. And this old goat has something to say. So just keep learning from Grandpa Dennis's turning. This is what's left of my oak firewood. And as you see, most of it has significant bark on it. It's the bark from here that I've peeled off, and I'm going to make something very unique out of that. What am I doing now? Well, if you guessed that this is bark, you're right. This is the bark from bur oak. It comes from my firewood pile. I've taken it off, and it's been sitting in the sun for 2 or 3 months. So now I'm going to try and clean up as much of the dirt in here as I can, and I'm going to make a bowl out of it. This is where I'll be cleaning up the bark. This is a wire wheel. It's inserted into a 5/8" chuck that has a Morse 2 taper on it with a threaded component at the end of the taper. I've got a threaded rod going right through the headstock, attached down at the end with a nut. This system is needed for this kind of operation because when you put sideways pressure on this wire wheel, it tends to loosen the Morse taper. But with the threaded rod going through and attached at the other end, it's securely held. This is a very dusty procedure, and I need my vacuum on as well as a full face respirator. This has cleaned up all the loose fibers on the bark. It does get a little tricky because it wants to grab onto the wire brush. Now I'll do some cleaning up with air pressure in here with the compressor, and that'll clean up anything else that's loose. The first thing in the project is to put this plastic all around the bowl that's going to be used as the form. The plastic is there for a specific reason. When I put the bark inside the bowl and fill it with resin, I'll be putting that into my vacuum chamber. The vacuum chamber draws air out of the resin and out of the bark. When that happens, it bubbles up and it will spill over top of the form I've got. So I've put the plastic all the way around to give more height to the bubbles as they come up and still keep them within the container. This container will be used to take up space in the center of the form. That'll save me a lot of resin because that is going to get hollowed out and it would turn all that resin into shavings. Again, I put plastic around it because I don't want the foam to come up and go inside this particular spacer. Now I'll be putting pieces of bark all the way around. I'll also put some in the very bottom so that this form will sit on top of the bark, which will have resin embedded around it. I've cut out pieces that would fit the bottom. That gives me enough thickness all the way around that I could turn and shape the final bowl the way I want it. As I'm putting in the pieces of bark, I'm cutting them down to the right size on my bandsaw. It's a 2-to-1 mix And I'm going to be using white ice as the coloring. I had to use several liters of resin to fill the form. This is the cured casting after several hours in a vacuum chamber and 3 days in a pressure pot. I will use a sawzall to cut off the bark protruding from the top of the casting. If you're enjoying this video, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Unfortunately, I could not remove the blue plastic bowl that I used as a form, so I had to break pieces off and then turned away what was left over. I had glued a waste block onto the bottom of the casting and then secured a faceplate onto that waste block. This is a very safe way to hold the casting onto the lathe. I do use carbide-tipped tools to shape bowls that have a lot of very hard resin. Once the form is established, I sand the outside of the piece. Now I'm working on the inside of the bowl. The resin is very hard, but the bark is extremely soft. Tools are turning it into dust. I'm constantly measuring the wall thickness with calipers, or if I can reach, with my fingers. The goal is to have a consistent thickness from top to bottom. I sand the piece from about 80 grit all the way through to 1500. Then I buff it with white diamond compound to ensure that all the scratches on the resin are gone. My finish is a combination of urethane, linseed oil, and tung oil. I saturate the surface, wait 5 to 10 minutes, and then remove as much as I can. The next day, I repeat the process. Because the bark is so porous, this takes many, many days. Here's the finished bowl. I am quite pleased with the way this turned out. The beautiful white ice-looking coloring in between with the real dark and black bark is amazing. Who knew you could make a bowl out of pieces of bark? Well, here it is. I'm quite pleased with that. If you like this video, it's one of quite a few that I've got on my YouTube channel. Please subscribe. Hit the bell, and that'll give you the opportunity to see my new videos as they get posted. If you have some comments on this, I'd appreciate that. That would help me.
Grandpa Dennis is turning.
I'm alright, 'cause I'm okay. Doesn't matter if my beard is gray. Just listen, I have something to say.
Grandpa Dennis is turning.
I'm alright, 'cause I'm okay. And this old goat has something to say. So just keep learning from Grandpa Dennis's Turning.